Hello friends, welcome back to Uncle Willy's coloring book tutorial number 5, Shadows, Highlights, and Gradients. In this final video of this series, we will add highlights, shadows, and gradients. This is the final enhancement to our artwork. Let's open Photoshop and the document we've been working on, Three Bears and Cars. As we left it, we have a flat color layer and a line art layer above it. It's locked. Now, I'd like to review a few of the things that we did. In understanding the workspace a little better, we've created our own toolbar. We've changed our workspace around and saved it. Coloring workspace. Over here on the flyout menu, I don't know if I've covered it before, but under panel options, you can change the size of the thumbnail for the layers in the layers panel. I have it set at the largest. If you haven't done that yet, you might want to, because we're not dealing with that many layers and it's easier to see over here. Okay. We've looked at the tools and their associated settings. Going from one to another, magic wand, they all come up. We've got an eraser tool, which we're going to go over a little more. Okay. Now, hopefully, you've colored this all in, and it might not look exactly like mine, but it's similar to mine. There's one thing that I wanted to change, but first let's take a look at our shortcuts. Of course, you know Control plus Z is undo. Control plus D is to deselect any selection you've made. And while on the brush tool, to get the eyedropper, you hold Alt down. And to get the magic wand, you hold W down. And to get the eraser tool, you hold E. Bracket keys control the brush size up and down, left bracket, right bracket, and the space bar, when you push that, it enables the hand tool and you can move the document around. To further drive that point home, I'm going to grab a black brush. I'm just going to stroke across that and I'm going to hit Control plus Z and that undoes that. While I'm on the brush tool, if I hold W, I get the magic wand tool. Control Z to undo that. If I hold E while on the brush tool, I get the eraser tool. Control Z to undo that. If I press the space bar, I can move the document around. And as well, if I scroll in and out, I can, with the scroll wheel, I can zoom in and out of this document. That said, it's time to dive further into what we can do with this document. First of all, we're going to, on the flat color layer, we're going to just grab the magic wand tool and we're going to select this part of this image that's blue. You can see that it kind of leaked over a little bit onto there, but that's fine. Now what we're going to do there is we can do it two different ways. We can right click on in the selected area and we can create a layer via copy. So that selection that we made, the blue sky, is now copied to its own layer and we can work on it there. I'm going to delete that because there's a simpler way to do it. when you are on the magic wand and you select, say you select any piece of this based on the color, because you're selecting it from the flat color layer. Any piece of this selected, flat colors. We're going to select the sky, and then instead of right-clicking and saying layer via copy, we're going to hit Control plus J. This is an important shortcut we haven't covered, but that in effect does the same thing. It copies your selection to a new layer. Of course, the selection is no longer visible because it's not, but we can on this layer with the selected parts copied to it, we can press Control and click on it, and it reselects what's on this layer. Now, what we want to do to this sky, we want to do a couple of different things to this sky. We want to add in a gradient. We're going to choose the gradient tool, and we're going to open the gradient. We're going to choose the color on the right by clicking here, and we're going to, it automatically gives you the magic wand, and we're going to choose that blue color. Then we're going to pick the color on the left. We're going to choose that blue color again, but we're going to dive in further to this color box, and we're going to lighten that color a little bit. Okay. We're going to darken this color a little bit. Okay. So now we've got our gradient set up from light to dark. We're going to click OK. And we're going to, on that layer, got to be on that layer, we're going to choose a linear gradient here, linear gradient, not the radial gradient, linear. And we're going to drag from the top down to about there. And what that did was it went from light to dark. You can do this multiple times, but each time you do it, it changes, it sort of erases your first instance of the gradient and it replaces it with your second try. So you can stretch it out longer and see what you get, and you can shorten it up a little bit and see what you get. All the while you're decreasing the area from light to dark. Like if I just drag a little bit, then only that top part's light and it gets dark really fast. I want it to increase gradually. I'm going to drag the length of the area that I want to affect, and so that it's light at the top and it's dark at the bottom. Now this was on this layer, as you can tell, evidenced by that. It's on top of this, so it shows over the top of what's underneath. That's in a normal blend mode, opacity 100%. Now I'm going to deselect by hitting Control plus D, and I'm going to further tweak this sky layer. Of course, I could minimize the effect of it by dialing back its opacity, but I don't want to do that. I want to keep it right where it is, and I want to go to the brushes, make sure white, flip these around, make sure white is my foreground color. I'm going to grab the first clouds brush by Mila, and then still on that layer, I'm going to back out a little bit with the scroll wheel, and I'm just going to click once. Whoops, wait a minute, I got to undo that. Let's press Control and click on that thumbnail, and now we've reselected that area. So that's the only thing we're going to affect. All the rest, what looks blank here, it won't paint on that. Now we're going to take that brush, just click once, and we've added, now we can deselect, we've added some clouds to that. You know what, I'm going to undo that because I really don't like how that cloud ended up looking. I'm going to try to use a different part of this. That's a little better. So now I'm going to deselect by holding Control D on this layer, and I'm going to blur this layer a little bit just to diffuse the obvious cloud formations there. We're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and you can tell how much you're blurring in real time with this. We just want to blur it a little bit, soften it up a little bit. About right there is good. Okay, click OK. All right, that layer is done. We're going to get back to this, but what we're going to do is we're going to name this layer, double click on the layer name, and call it gradient, because we're going to add more gradients to this layer. With that done, if you can't see the names of these thumbnails, what the heck did I do there? Control C. If you can't see the names of these layers, sometimes it's squashed too much and the name just becomes shortened, or there's just the first letter or something to it. All you have to do is drag this window out a little tiny bit and you can see the name. Since we can see the names, I'm not going to do that right now. All right, we've got that. I'm going to get back on a normal brush here. We've got that done. We added the gradient and we actually added the clouds in there, and it made a difference in the sky. It looks more realistic right away. Very nice. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to that flat color. We're going to be pivoting between the magic wand and the brush tool. So on that layer with the brush tool selected, I can press W, get the magic wand. All the settings are just like we left them, and click on this bear's head. Then with that selected, I'm going to go up to this layer because that selection is valid. I'm going to go to the gradient. I'm going to readjust this gradient. So this color is the bear's head, and this color is the bear's head, but lightened up a little bit. Click OK. Click OK. Now we're on that gradient layer. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a gradient, and it's based on the colors of the bear's head. We're going to pick radial gradient, and we're just going to drag from the point that would be the brightest on his head outward a little bit. And what we get is, I'm going to deselect, Control plus D. What we get is an enhanced brightness on his head because we just selected his head. So the gradient only worked on that selection portion. And now we're going to go back to and hold W. We're still on the, well, we're not on the brush tool anymore. Okay, we're on the brush tool. Hold W. I'm going to select this head. And I'm going to go back to the gradient layer. We still have that same gradient in place, the one we created from light brown to darker brown. And we're going to do the same thing on his head. Just going to drag out a little bit. See how that looks? We're going to hit Control Z to undo. I'm going to drag out a little bit farther. And that looks pretty good. I'm good with that. So now we don't have to really shift gears too much, but we're going to go to the flat color layer and hold W and pick this bear's head now. Now back on the gradient layer, we're going to grab the gradient tool, which is also G on your keyboard. If you're learning shortcuts, it shows you what any tool's shortcut is right here. That's E. That's G. So we're going to grab the gradient tool. We're going to do the same thing to his head. We'll just drag out from about here, a little bit over there. And now I'm going to hit Control D and deselect. And so now what we've done is created gradient in the sky and a gradient on the bear's heads. Now, on this gradient layer, you can invoke the eraser to erase whatever you've put down. So, with this eraser tool, and now you have to, this won't be the same as the brush tool, so you have to set this as you go. I'm going to make it as soft as possible. Opacity of about 20% maybe. Don't want it. And smoothing at 8%. And what I can do is I can go back in here and subtly erase that gradient if it came down a little too far. So I just want to just take away a little bit of that gradient that came down too far on their heads. I'm going to reduce the brush size with the bracket key, which actually works on the eraser too. I just want to take off a little bit of that gradient and push it back onto his forehead a little bit. Looks a little more realistic. Now, we're working on that gradient layer, which is where we laid the gradient down. Just looks little. And you can subtly erase. When you do something, you can go back, and if the opacity is lower, you can, and it's a soft brush, soft eraser, you can subtly erase. So it gives you a little more control over the whole thing. Just one stroke at a time, click, 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 and you can get where you need to be on that. I'm pretty good with that. Looks good. And now what we can do also is we could put gradients on, let's say, if you wanted to go back to this and hold W, on the brush tool, hold W, or you can just be on. See, when I'm on the brush tool and I hold W, it toggles to the magic wand. So I could pick up that and I could go back to that gradient layer. I could create a gradient based on the colors of the car, because now it's set on the colors of the bear. But I could pick the color of the car and then pick the color of the car again, but change this left-hand color to something a little brighter. Click OK. So now it goes from the color of the car to the secondary color, which was a little brighter. And I could, with the radial gradient, I could, throw a gradient on that car, and it's color based. This isn't light based. This is the colors we chose. We're just laying over the top of the car. Although that looks okay, it's a long way to go doing all those gradients. So for now, I'm going to undo that and deselect. I'm going to undo that and keep this gradient layer as is. I think I'll just grab the eraser tool and just come back and just erase a little bit more of that. I don't really want it coming down on its forehead so much. In fact, you'll see that with that gradient, we put a little more than we wanted on the face there. So that's okay. So that's all good. I'm pretty happy with that. So those are just like the top of their head gradients, and that's fine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, I've got a funny artifact that was actually part of the bush, but I want to remove it. So I'm going to unlock that line art layer. I'm going to go back and I'm going to get the hard brush, on white, because that layer is just white and black. I can actually like show you right here. I'm going to hold Alt, pick up that white color, and with a smaller brush, I'm just going to paint that line away because I just don't want it. And so that's done. And we'll get back in gear here. What we're going to do is we're going to create above this grid. Let's lock that line art layer just for safety's sake. On this gradient layer, we're going to create a couple of layers for shadows and highlights. And how I like to do that is to use curves. I'm going to create a curves layer, and then I'm going to create another curves layer. So we have two curves layers. When you, on either one of these, what we're going to do first is we're going to, let's see, here's that trick about this. We're going to name this curves shadows. And we're going to name this curves highlights. And even though you can't see it, all you have to do is pull this out to see what you're doing there. See what I mean? The name goes away, but it's okay, because I know shadows is below, highlights are above. Now on the curve setting, you gotta double click that. Since this is the highlights, we want to take this line, we want to click on that line and drag it up until it curves. It almost starts making a straight line on the top there, just about there. And then on the shadows curves layer, we're going to take that, we're going to left click and drag that down until it just about straightens out on the bottom there. See, right about there. And that's good. Now we can minimize that. So it's showing you, because the mask is all white, it's showing you all of the effect of that curves adjustment, all of the effect of that darkening everything. But what we want to do is we want to invert mouse. We want to invert these masks, and I'm going to show you about masks. And what we do is we could just click on the mask and fill it with black, or we can just use a shortcut and hold Control and press I, and that inverts that mask. We're going to do the same with this one, Control plus I, and that inverts that. Now that's like putting a garbage bag over the adjustment that you created. You created a highlight adjustment, but because it's black, the mask, it's not letting anything show through. And what we do is, with a white brush selected, because it's a black mask, we want to reveal what's in this adjustment layer, because it's a black bag over it now, but we want to carve that away with, we're going to say about 15%, 16%. Choose a soft brush. Now let's choose a medium brush for this. And we're going to go in with the bracket keys, adjust our brush size, and we're on this mask, remind you. And that's going to let, when we paint with white, that's going to let that adjustment show through. You know what? I think I'm going to back up from that. Control Z. Let's choose the soft brush. Same opacity. Oh, same opacity about, let's say 12%. We're going to, this is a different brush. It's a different size. So we're going to go decrease the size, maybe pump that up a tiny bit more. And with each time you stroke it, it's going to get brighter and brighter. So you click and you click again, and each instance of your brush, as you're painting there, brightens it a little more incrementally every time you do it, because you're only using it at 18%. So it'd take 5 passes to get 100% brightness. Now, with that done, what you can do, see that little bit of white that's showing through there? Well, that's where I'm letting this adjustment show through, because it is a black mask, like a garbage bag over the adjustment. And with white, I'm revealing the adjustment. So it's pretty cool. And now what you can do on that mask is you have to adjust this eraser tool, and then it'll stay wherever you adjust it. I'm going to make it as soft as possible. I'm going to actually keep its opacity about the same spot, 15%. I'm going to, with the bracket keys, I'm going to reduce it. Once you do this, then it'll be like that next time you grab it. And I'm just going to finesse this line and just make it a little less pronounced, so it's a little more soft. So that's basically, I could go in here, I'm still on that mask, and I could take the brush, and it's still set up the way we had it, 18% opacity, and I could go back in and do more brightening. And as well, just hold E, get the eraser tool that we had set up, and just diminish that a little bit, just soften that up a little bit. It's kind of weird there because it doesn't really fade into the line. So just make it nice. So that's basically painting on the mask to reveal that adjustment underneath, and then holding E to invoke the eraser tool, and keep holding E and just smooth that away. If it's not set up quite right for you and it's not working the way, well, it's probably because it's too much. You have too much opacity. You want it to act less with each pass that you make. Then you have to like adjust this opacity so that it's affecting it a little bit less. So I'm good with that. Then I move over, I'm still on the same mask, move over here, and I'm on the brush tool because I only pressed E to get the eraser tool temporarily. And I make a highlight on his ear, and I make it a little brighter and a little brighter. So it's, and then I hold E, and with the eraser tool, that's a little too big. I'm going to go to this eraser tool and hold the bracket keys and make that a little smaller. Okay. Now I'm back on the brush tool. Hold the E to get the eraser tool, and then just smooth that back a little bit. With each pass, it kind of, as it comes around here, you want it to fade into the ear so it looks more natural. And that way you can make a nice, soft highlight on the ear, on the top of the ear. Needs a little tiny bit more there. Just gonna throw in a little more. I know that's nitpicky, but you know, we strive for excellence in everything we do, so that's the way it goes. Now, you can continue in this fashion, remembering that whatever's on top that the sun is shining down on with the brush tool, you can paint a little highlight. And that's pretty subtle there, but that's fine. And when I got down to the hand and the shirt, there's going to be some light shining on that. So I want a little light there. I want some, I can increase this, actually increase the brush size a little bit. I want some light over on this side because the sun's shining on that. Then with the eraser tool, by pressing E, I can just kind of smooth that out a little bit so it's not as bright. Still holding E. I don't really want it to come down that far, so I just smooth it back. Looks good. On the steering wheel, I want a little highlight, so I just let off holding E to get the brush tool again, and then I'll hold E and just kind of fade that back. So then I'll come down here on the car, I'll make a highlight here. Wait a minute. That's got to be set to luminosity. That's important because it just, this one as well, we'll just set those to luminosity right now. I forgot to do that, sorry. And that makes it so the color is not affected, but the brightness is the only thing that's affected. I'm going to hold E and just, oh, wait a minute. Undo that. On the brush tool, hold E and just get the eraser, and you can tell because if you look over at the toolbar, I'm holding E, and if I'm on the brush tool and I'm holding E, oh, that's why I'm on the, oh, things happen. But in any event, that's what I did there. I actually undid that. So we're still on the highlights. Make sure. You know, if you don't want to do something by accident, you can just lock that layer too. So we're on the highlights, still working highlights. And if I press the E, I get the eraser tool. So we'll go over here, put some highlights on the top of his arm. A little more on the top of this car here. Hold E, and I can just smooth that back a little bit, make it a little softer. I can do the same here. I don't want it to come down around his hand, just be on top of his hand. So you just, see how just kind of like soften that up a little bit. With the eraser tool, it's gradual. You just do a little bit at a time. You can push it back. And then you go back to the brush tool. You want a little more. You add a little more. Eraser tool, push it back by holding E. And that way you can have a little more control over the softness of your highlight. I'm going to go over here, put a little more highlights on the top of this arm, and then hold E and kind of dial it back a little bit. Just feather that edge a little tiny bit. Put some on the bushes, tops of the bushes. Click, stroke at a time. Click, click, click. And then with E, just soften that up a little bit with the eraser tool. And you can see that it makes a big difference, like how soft you can make it by just going back and erasing what you don't want to affect. You can make things look a little more rounded. just click a few times there and make a highlight. But with the eraser tool, I can round it out, it's really nice. Just a click there, couple clicks there. Just give it a little highlight. Just leave that like it is. There's a little highlight on the back of his scarf. His arm could use a little more there. Just basically go around and on the tops of everything, which is really what we're looking to affect, we would, now I'm erasing, we would have these highlights. This actually could have a little more there. It's pretty good. You want to go in and out to see if it looks right. You can tell a lot by going in and out. I'll hold the hand tool. I want to get over here on his knee because he needs a little tiny bit up here, not much, but I'm just going to put, and then I'll hold E to get the eraser and just smooth that out a little bit. Just needs a little bit of evidence of just a touch there. So maybe not even that much, but just a smidge. Okay, so that's good. Top of his leg, got the car, got this car, his arm, his other arm, or her or him. Little tiny bit on his nose there. Just a couple clicks. Makes a highlight on that. We got the bushes. Got these bushes. Just add a little highlight to the top of those. Couple here and there. I think the sun's kind of is coming this way down, so I'm trying to stay to the left of these things. Then I'll go to the eraser tool to smooth it back a little bit, round it out a little more, make it like a pillow, and just try to make it a little less, like you did a dab there. I did something wrong there. Okay, keep going. You got to do his ears. You got to stay on the tops, stay on track, get all the tops of everything with a little highlight. I like that. That's okay. I'm not even going to erase any of that. It came out okay. I will erase a little bit of this though, because I want that to fade from the top there a little bit. Maybe take a little bit of this away, tiny bit. Got a couple little dabs on the top of his hair there, just a little tiny bit. I'm just doing that by clicking. Get his nose while I'm here. Get these bushes while I'm here. A little bit there, that looks okay. There, a little bit here. Actually press E to feather that back a little bit. Here too. And the scarf just gets a tiny bit there. Tiny bit. My arm's falling asleep. I'll be back in a second. Okay, keep going here. We're on that mask. And we're going to just increase the brush a little bit. We can cover a little more real estate there. A little highlight on there. Top of his hand, up on his sleeve. And then hold E to get the eraser tool to kind of feather that back a little bit. Just a little bit. Erase that a little bit. Top of his car. You can see how it brightens it up a little at a time. You click, 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 and drag. Actually, a little bit up there too. And we go in with the eraser tool by holding E, kind of feather that back, round it out a little, make it look like it's rounded. Put a little more there. Just take away some of that. Maybe a little bit coming down the tip of the hood there. Yeah, I'm not going to do any on his knee because that's seemingly too far away from the sun and highlights in general. Doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to denote. I think I did something there. Oh yeah. Just has to denote a little bit of brightness, a little extra highlight there. What would be the top? Something the sun would hit on. Just a tiny bit here, very little. That's if he's blocked by his head, there's not going to be any highlight. Like up here on his shoulder, there's no highlight because his head's actually shadowing that. And we will get to shadows in a minute. This gradient layer, I'm looking at it and I'm not really loving that too much. I got to get back on this eraser. I'm gonna increase it, still at 15%, and I'm going to just move a tiny bit more of that because I want some brightness on the top of his head, but their heads, but I don't really want it to be in your face, you know. So we need to continue on the highlights layer mask. Go over on the brush tool on white as my color. Put some more highlights on the tops of his ears. This little tuft of hair there. There's already some brightness from the gradient, but that's fine. It's like a building thing. You build a little bit at a time, highlights, shadows. That looks good. A little bit on his nose, or did I already get that? He could use a little more on that top of his nose, her nose. So I'm pretty good with that. Of course, you could, you know, it's all your taste. That's a little too much there, so I'm gonna press E and kind of try to wipe a little bit of that out. It's just a little too bright there, especially in that color. It's probably the color that's making it like that. Seem like that it's too bright. But that's good. Got a little highlight there, highlight over here, highlight there on their heads, their noses. Maybe a little more on this car. A couple of spots we could brighten up a little bit, just a little bit. Of course, we're only going at 18% for with each pass. And there's one other thing as far as highlights go. I want to use the same brush, soft brush, just want to increase it, and I just want to give this a couple of clicks. Keep clicking until it looks like the headlight is, it's just a little brighter around that headlight. If I click it on and off that layer, you can see where the highlights are. And that light, you know, is shining a little bit there. I'm going to do the same with the other lights. Just click, click, click on the left side of them. Maybe decrease the brush size for this one. Just click a little bit over there and over here. And that little bit of like 10 clicks or whatever at 18% makes a difference. You can see that where the lights are brighter where I did that. Okay. So we've done quite a bit. That actually, when we blurred it, the blue that we put on this gradient layer actually kind of moved into the clouds there because it's over the top of it. It's over the top of the flat color layer. So it kind of like blurred it in a little bit. I like it. Of course, you could always, if you thought it was too much or something, you could always go back to that gradient layer, invoke the eraser tool, and eliminate that little bit of blue that's spilled over. You know, it's your drawing, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. But the beauty of using this structure here with with the two um, with the two curves adjustment layers, one being highlights and one being shadows, is that you can go into that adjustment layer, because here we're painting where we want it to show. All those little pieces of white is where we want it to show through it, whatever opacity we chose. But we could take that and actually change that brightness. We can change it to suit our own devices. So it was here, and we can dial it back a little bit and make it less bright. I'm going to keep it that bright because let's collapse this. There's another way that we can, this isn't working. Undo that because I didn't mean that. There's another way that we can dial back that particular layer is just simply through the opacity. If we go 0 opacity, it took it all away. And then if we go 100% opacity, it brought it all back. But somewhere you might want to dial it back just so it's a little less obvious, you know. You can see I'm scrolling back and forth here. Just keep it at 100 for now, but that's another way where you can tone back anything that's on that layer that you may think is a little too over the top. It's too much. Okay, that's highlights for now. We're going to lock that. We're going to unlock shadows, because we set up the shadows to be, anytime you don't want the mask to affect what your adjustment is, you just hold shift and click on the mask, and it'll eliminate the mask temporarily. You can hold shift and click on it again to bring it back. So we've erased by putting a black plastic bag over this adjustment. Now we're going to click on the mask because it's all done from the mask. We're going to, with the same white, because we're revealing, same brush, same opacity, we're going to do some shadows. On this drawing, you can see the little dots that make up the drawing, what helps to be a shadow, because it's meant to be a shadow under his ear. There's a couple dots there. We're going to put a little bit, paint a little bit there, and that shows you that where I paint white on this black mask, that's going to show through. I'm really not too happy with that, so I'm going to back up a little bit. Now I'm going to decrease that opacity a little bit. I don't want it to affect it quite as much. Be a little softer. We're on the soft brush. And be a little smaller, because I really don't, I somehow got shifted from the mask to the layer. I want to be on the mask. I'm going to hold E and take the eraser and I'm going to erase what I did there because it's way too much. It's already got a shadow there. I'm not going to concentrate on that. What I want to do is go down to the bottom of his face, though. That's way too much. That's 100%. I don't know how that got changed around, but we need to be at about 12% on this mask, painting with white, because we're trying to reveal this shadow. And I'm just going to run along the bottom of his face, head, until I get the effect that I'm looking for there. I can actually spill underneath, although it won't affect bright colors much, shadows. You have to do it a different way, but I can actually tone that down under there as well. And by doing this, stroke after stroke and building it up, I'm creating shadow under that. Now I'm going to click this layer on and off to show you exactly what I've done. See, I painted with white on the black mask so it reveals the essence of this adjustment layer, which we set up to be darker to make the shadows. I'm going to go down here, just add a little more to the bottom of his hand, bottom of his sleeve, onto the bottom of his shirt. And remember, if you go too far, you can always hold E and just subtly smooth that back out, stroke at a time. You know, you want to be subtle because you're trying to feather it. So you just want to take it back a little bit at a time. You can see when I change from the brush to the eraser, there's an obvious size difference because we have them set up at different sizes. So if I switch the eraser, you can see it's a different size. But I just want to stay on the bottom of everything. And what should be in shadows, just make it a little darker. And then with the eraser, come back and maybe take some of it away because it's not great. And you go on and on like that, trying to present the appearance of a little bit of shadow difference under everything that should have a shadow on it. So on the bottom side of pretty much anything where you want a shadow. In here it would be quite shadowed because his head or her head is covering that all. A little more down here, a little more in there. And with each pass, it gets darker and darker. So that's, and then you can always erase it. So I'm pretty good with that. I don't want to go too far with this. I'm just trying to show you. I do want to feather that a little bit though. Kind of smooth that out a little bit. Just want to show you how to create those shadows a little bit at a time. Go soft, go back with the eraser and just feather that back a little bit. Made a nice little shadow on the bottom of his ear there. And on and on. Since we've gone this far, we might as well, you know, seal the deal and finish this thing in real time. Put a little bit underneath his chin. And then feather that back a little bit because there's already black dots on there, so it already kind of makes it look like a shadow. You can see where those black dots are on the drawing itself. It's meant to be shadowed to some extent. So we'll just stay with that program and follow those lines to, I just want to erase a little bit of that. Oh, I'm not erasing. On E, holding E, let's erase a little bit of that. Put a little more over here. It's in shadows. A little bit, because it's already dark, pretty dark there. And that's about it. So there we go. There's already shadows under these cars, so we don't have to add that really. But it just enhances maybe a little bit under the mouth. Just a couple of dabs here and there, and it makes a big difference. A little tiny bit of shadow just makes a difference in your final work. Because remember, anything, I'm going to decrease the brush size a little and go in here real tight. Just add a little bit of darkness to the corner of the mouth. And you can take this as far as you want. Now that's too much. I'm going to press E and just click, click, click. Take away a little bit of that. There. I just wanted a little tiny signature of darkness underneath his lip there. And maybe a little bit over here too. Just a couple clicks, click, 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 and that filled that in pretty good. A little bit of shadow under there. Fine. That's nice. So that's where we stand. We've added highlights. We've added shadows. We have a gradient layer where we made selections from the flat color layer, like holding the magic wand and selecting. Now you'll notice that I didn't really get a good selection because I have to go back to the flat color layer to get the selection. That's where there's true flat color, that 100% color. And then I got all of what was blue. Deselect that, Control plus D. And so I think that's about it. You know, there's one other thing that I want to, so we got the flat color layer, we got our gradient layer, which affected the sky and the tops of their heads, basically, is all we did on that. Shadow layer, that's set to luminosity. Luminosity, gradient layer is normal, flat color layer is normal, line art layer is normal. It's locked so you don't see that. But here we have highlights, here we have shadows. If you wanted to dial back any of those adjustments that you made, you could just decrease the opacity and it will diminish. It will make it less, have less of an effect on the overall piece. Now, one thing I want to do above this flat color layer is add another layer, because I want to make a vignette. So let's get black as our color, a soft brush, not quite, yeah, a little bigger than that, a little bigger. I don't know why. Oh, you know what? That's because we didn't set that soft brush up at that opacity. But I wanted to make sure that you check your opacity whenever you're going to do anything, because that's how much effect it has on your piece. I'm going to get a bigger brush, and with black as our foreground color, painting on this new layer that's above the flat color layer, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of black in these corners. And that is what they call That's what they call a vignette. We don't have to add a vignette to the top of the sky. It's not really necessary. Of course, I'm going a little too far with this vignette, but as I told you before, what we can do with it is just dial back the opacity of that layer, and then it becomes a little less. We can actually blur it because we've made a new layer. Let's do that first. We'll go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blurs, best choice, and then we can actually just go a little bit at a time, blur that a little bit until it's looks good out there, and then uh, pull back the opacity of the layer a little tiny bit so we have nice vignette in each corner down there. It's probably a little too much. Just a little bit of vignette down there. I'm good with that. Okay, so it looks like we're at the end. Of course, you can do more or less. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you like. You might end up going back in and saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to go back in. I'm going to grab that white brush. Got that white brush, soft brush, opacity of 13, and I want some more shadows, just a little more. I'm going to decrease the brush size, dive in here. I just want this to be a little more in shadows down here because it's at the bottom of everything, and that's where shadows happen. So like I say, you can take it as far as you want. It actually made it quite a bit of difference there. Just that little bit of shadow down low there. Looks good. Looks like it belongs there. And of course, every time you make a pass with the brush, it increases 13% of the darkness that you wanted to put on that. Just a little bit of shadow here and there makes a little bit of difference, and lets everybody know, or your eye know, that your eyeball know that that is making a shadow underneath. Looks good. Come in here. A little more shadow over there. That's good. Scarf needs a little more. This actually needs a little more here too. And I don't think we did any under there. Just put a tiny bit under there. That all looks good. Like I say, you want to make any fine-tune adjustments, use your opacity for any of these given layers, be it the highlights, shadows, all those gradients that we made. Look at it. Isn't that ugly before? And now look how much nicer that looks. We laid in some clouds on that layer after making the selection, dragged a gradient, a linear gradient down so it was light at the top, darker at the bottom, and that all enhances this drawing and makes it a little more dimensional, where things that are affected by the sun are brighter. There's a shadow under things that where it should be, and I'm going to call that a day. Hopefully you've enjoyed this journey through learning Photoshop, learning how to set up brushes, how to set up your workspace, understanding the tools and the controls for each tool. Of course, we didn't go too far into, you can do a million things with Photoshop, but this has been based on or is geared toward coloring these simple drawings. We went from line art, which looks like, wow, that looks bright, doesn't it? And then added the flat color beneath. Whoops. line art. Then we added the flat color underneath that line art. It's just color, 100% color. And then we did our gradients in the clouds. And then we did shadows, highlights, and a little vignette on the bottom on its own layer. We didn't rename that, but we should, because you should name your layers. That way there's no confusion. So we're going to save this document, and we just click save because it's saved as 3 Bears and Cars anyway. And it's in our folder structure where we kept everything. And we're going to export our finished image as a JPEG. So we'll go File, Save As. I'm going to get to that folder. And the only thing that shows up in there is because it's all reliant on how you're saving an image. Of course, you probably know that already. So I choose JPEG, 3 Bears and Cars. It's going into this one coloring folder we created. Bam. Save it. Maximum quality. Okay. Now I'm going to close Photoshop because we're done with it. I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to take a look at our finished JPEG document. There. Isn't that nice? You should be proud of yourself if you got through this and you came out with something you're happy with. It's a lot of work, but with all that work came a better understanding of Photoshop, and it's always easier the second time. So once you've done something once, you can do it again. Stay tuned to Uncle Willy's YouTube channel, because I plan to do more advanced things in Photoshop, and I plan to offer links to people who are really good at coloring, that do comic books, and they do it digitally. So now whether you're buying Uncle Willy's comic books in print and hand coloring them, which is great, I'm all for that, or digitally coloring, I'm gonna try to have you covered, and you might learn something, and you're gonna feel a great accomplishment. And my next coloring book, when I can get around to doing it, is going to be a coloring book with characters that you can cut out and put on a background. It's going to be more like, if anybody knows what color forms were, you would actually peel them off, and they were stickers, and you would put them on a background, and you make your own little scene. That's what it's going to be about. I don't know any more than that now, but look for it. Uncle Willy, UncleWillysColoringBooks.com, and be kind to everyone and spread love, and have a great day. And thank you for the time we've spent here together on Uncle Willy's Coloring Books tutorials. Take care. Bye-bye.